Man, I tell you what, we are back. We are back. Mediocre at Best Sports Podcast with Realistic Randy. I do apologize. I've been out the last 2 weeks for a couple of reasons. First reason, actually both of the reasons are completely my fault. So 2 weeks ago, I actually did record a podcast. I was actually going to talk about the controversial hit Anthony Barr on Aaron Rodgers, in which he broke his collarbone. He's out for the year, in which it wasn't a late hit. That play happens all the time without a flag being called. But anyway, I did record a podcast and ready to talk about that. But the way this works here is I record here at the studio, which I built in my home. I send everything out to my producer, Aaron Roberts, of Blue Vision Entertainment out in San Diego, and he puts everything together for me. Long story short, my computer crashed. Downloading these videos, man, it's just a complete pain in the ass. I'm sure creators out there, you guys know what it's like. But anyway, my computer just couldn't handle it. It was a lot of issues. But anyway, we got everything up and running again, so that's neither here nor there. And I was actually ready to record last week until I lost my voice. So long story short, Bay Area drivers, they are the worst drivers in the entire universe. I will say that to the day I die, at least in the country. I've never traveled outside of the U.S. I mean, I've been outside the continental U.S. I've been to Hawaii once, but I've never traveled outside the U.S. Bay Area drivers are the stupidest drivers that you will ever find in the United States of America. Everyone knows, all the competent drivers know that fast drivers are authorized to be in the left lane, or not authorized, but the left lane are for the fast drivers. But Bay Area drivers, they just don't seem to give a damn. They will do 20 miles per hour under the speed limit and get mad at you for getting mad at them. So long story short, I was yelling at a car. And I know you're not supposed to do that because with everything going on nowadays, all the road rage incidents, you never know. But I had to let them know. I almost totaled my car because of this jackass. But anyway, I lost my voice mid-yelling. So anyway, I'm just still recovering from that. But we're ready to go now. This is going to be an all Vikings podcast this week. This is the Vikings mid-season report, giving my grades for the offensive and the defensive sides of the ball. Going to break down each position group. And the Vikings, they're heading into the bye week 6-2. And for their remaining schedule, they've got 3 home games and 5 road games remaining. So we'll just have to see how they go. We'll also talk about the outlook as far as the rest of the season is concerned. But first, let's start with the defense. So the defense, I don't think there's anything to it. They deserve an A+. I give them an A+. Let's start with the defensive line. Linval Joseph, he's been a stud per usual. He's disrupting the interior of opposing offensive lines. He's doing what he's absolutely been paid to do. He's doing a great job. Everson Griffin, he's been doing well. He's basically been getting a sack a game. My only gripe with him was in that Cleveland Browns game last week. He seemed to be a little bit flat-footed. He wasn't the same intense guy. And when you consider the fact that there was no Joe Thomas. Joe Thomas is out for the year, the left tackle, star left tackle of the Cleveland Browns. He's out for the year. So you're going against their backup left tackle and the fact that it's the Cleveland Browns. I was expecting Everson Griffin to wreak havoc, but he really didn't. He had pretty much a quiet day. There was one play in particular where he was out in the backfield. There was no one out there in front of him. He was out there in the backfield, and he was going up against Isaiah Crowell. And Isaiah Crowell basically just ran right around him without even trying. He seemed a little bit flat. You don't really see that from Everson Griffin. You would imagine, oh, he's going to get him, no problem. But anyway, he ran right around him. I don't know. Maybe he was just enjoying the ambiance of being in London, or maybe he wasn't taking the Cleveland Browns seriously. But anyway, he's been absolutely fantastic. Danielle Hunter, he's got, so far in this season, 20 tackles and 3 sacks. You know, he hasn't really popped out this season as I thought he would. This is his first year being a starter opposite of Everson Griffin, so I'm sure he'll figure it out. He hasn't been great, but he hasn't been horrible as well, so I'll take that. And Tom Johnson, he's filled in very nicely as far as the opposite defensive tackle of Linval Joseph. Then when you move on to the second level of the defense, the linebacking core, Anthony Barr, he's had a resurgence in his career. He's looking very much like he was in his rookie year. He's absolutely getting after the quarterback. He's causing havoc. You could tell that quarterback's a little bit weary. As far as him being that outside linebacker, he looks like he's back in midseason form. I can't wait. And I can't wait to see how he does for the rest of this season. But getting back to that Aaron Rodgers hit, I guess because I didn't cover it like I would have 2 weeks ago. But, you know, for everyone that was sitting there saying it was a dirty hit, that play happens all the time without a flag being thrown. I don't get what the big issue is. And Aaron Rodgers was just, you know, Aaron Rodgers, yes, he's one of the top 2 premier quarterbacks in the league. I get that. But the crying that he was doing when I don't forgot what show he was on where he's like, oh, Anthony Barr, he saying F-bombs and giving the suck it sign, like, like D-Generation X, like the not WWE, but what it used to be called WWF, suck it. And by the way, I absolutely love that he did that. But the fact that he was complaining about that, it's like, stop the presses. Really? There's cursing in football? And I love that Anthony Barr teed off on him like, look, y'all were coming after me, so I responded back. How many times have you watched a football game with the referees where they're getting ready to call a penalty, they turn their mics on, and you can hear the players around them cursing, saying F-bombs to each other? It happens all the time. So I just thought it was completely soft. It was completely soft of Aaron Rodgers to go out there and just bitch and moan like that. But anyway, it is what it is. Anthony Barr, he's having a great year. Ben Gideon, same as Danielle Hunter. He hasn't been great. He hasn't been horrible. He's been okay. But I'm interested to see what kind of linebacker he turns into. And then when you talk about Eric Kendricks has been outstanding. He's been nothing short of outstanding this year. I'm looking at some stats here. He's got 40 tackles and 4 pass defenses this year. I don't know. There was a time, and I don't know if it's because of the way that the league gone, because now the quarterbacks, they expose all versions of the field. They just don't go across the middle of the field primarily like they used to back in the day, where the middle of the field was getting used up the most. Now it's pretty much balanced out all over the field. But back in the day when you had middle linebackers like Ray Lewis, you had Brian Urlacher, you had Zach Thomas out there, dominant middle linebackers. And it seems like middle linebackers nowadays, the quality of middle linebackers as far as great middle linebackers in today's league, they're a little bit few and far between. Eric Kendricks is a rare commodity. He's an all-around middle linebacker. In fact, what's so great about him is he can play the run. I don't really see him rush the passer much, but you really don't need him to, especially if he can play the run well. And he's great in pass coverage. So the fact that he's out there, he's making all things happen. So at some point, they're going to have to make a decision on Anthony Barr and Eric Kendricks. If it gets to a point where you have to choose between the two, in my personal opinion, I'm going with Eric Kendricks. But if they keep both of them, then, hey, I'm all for it. But anyway, he's having a good year. Then you go to the secondary. What we got here? Harrison Smith, he's the best safety in the league. There's nothing to talk about. He's an all-around safety. He rushes the passer. He gets after the quarterback. He can play the run. He's a surefire tackler, and he's great in pass coverage. He's got 3 interceptions, 1.5 sacks, and 34 tackles this year. And Andrew Sendejo, he's been absolutely outstanding so far this year. There was a point in time where Andrew Sendejo, was like, can we find a better safety to pair with Harrison Smith? And then when Andrew Sendejo would be out here, it's like, all right, I guess that's all we got. But I haven't seen anything bad from Andrew Sendejo this year. In fact, last year either. So he's been doing well. Trey Waynes, he's had a little bit of a rocky start. Got a couple of stats here. Earlier in the year, he had 2 pass interference calls and 1 defensive holding call. So he's had a history of being handsy with his opposing receivers that he's guarding. Since then, he hasn't had a penalty called on him. He's a surefire tackler. He's great in coverage. He just has to make sure he stops being handsy on those guys to keep away from getting those flags being called. So he's been absolutely great since those 3 or 4 games to start off the year. And then Xavier Rhodes. So here's the thing. I ran across this. Obviously, everyone knows that not everyone knows, but as far as Vikings fans, we know Xavier Rhodes, he's the best corner in the league. And I'm objective. I'm not no Vikings ass kisser out here. I call them out on their crap all the time. Xavier Rhodes is the best cornerback in the league. I ran across this real quick. Pro Football Focus currently has Xavier Rhodes as the 19th ranked cornerback in the league. 19th? 19th behind who? What other 18 quarterbacks are you going to put ahead of Xavier Rhodes? First of all, quarterbacks don't even throw at this dude anymore because they know the deal. Second of all, he follows all of the best receivers in the league, the elite receivers of the opposing teams, and pretty much gives them their career worst days of all time. And then second of all, Xavier Rhodes hasn't allowed a touchdown. He hasn't allowed a touchdown at all this year. So what are we talking about? And then I'm going to run by some numbers here for you as far as the number 1 receivers he's gone against. Now, the last 4 games, I'm not going to even consider that. I mean, he's done great. He's been great in every single game. But I'm not going to count the last 4 games because he's gone against the last 4 games. We beat the Browns, beat the Ravens, beat the Packers without Aaron Rodgers, and beat the Chicago Bears with Mitchell Trubisky. That's not even fair to really do that. So as far as the first 4 games with their quarterbacks paired up with their best receivers both on the field, Week 1, Michael Thomas. Xavier Rhodes held Michael Thomas to 2 catches for 22 yards. That next game against the Pittsburgh Steelers, we did lose that game 26-9. Case Keenum came out, wasn't ready. We thought Sam Bradford was going to be out there, but he suffered a non-contact knee injury after that Week 1 game against the Saints. And actually, in that game, I posted this on Facebook. I may have posted this on Twitter as well, but I know I posted it on Facebook. I said, I'm benching Antonio Brown because I have Antonio Brown in one of my fantasy football leagues. But that particular week, I said, I'm benching him because Xavier Rhodes is going to follow him all over the field, and he's going to shut him down. And I think I put up like a little bit of a giveaway, too. I said if Antonio Brown catches 6 catches for at least 60 yards and 1 touchdown, I was going to give away a $50 gift card to Liz to one random person that shared that video. Basically, and long story short, Antonio Brown, he finished with 5 catches for 62 yards and no touchdowns. Now, here's the caveat to that. Xavier Rhodes left late in the second half. It was actually probably like midway through the third quarter. I couldn't remember. He had some sort of injury. I don't remember if it was either a hamstring or something. But anyway, he went out the game, and the game was pretty much out of hand after that. We knew the Steelers were going to win that game. Before Xavier Rhodes left, Xavier Rhodes held Antonio Brown to 3 catches for 28 yards. Really? Are we 19th overall quarterback? Okay, Pro Football Focus. The next game after that, Mike Evans was held to 5 catches for 53 yards. And the next game after that against the Detroit Lions, Golden State Warriors. Golden Tate finished for 3 catches for 29 yards. Quarterbacks don't even throw at him anymore. And he's the 19th ranked cornerback in the league. Rhodes closed, man. There's nothing to talk about. I don't understand what the whole deal is with that. But anyway, when you consider the fact that you've got Harrison Smith, the best safety in the league, in my opinion. You've got Xavier Rhodes, the best cornerback in the league, in my opinion. A shutdown, bona fide shutdown cornerback. With that pass rush we got and the linebacker core we got, this defense deserves an A+. So next we're going to talk about the offense, but we're going to take a real quick break.
I'm Jay.
And I'm Matt of the hashtag NFZ, a.k.a. No Fly Zone, now officially part of the BGC Sports Network.
You can also find the show on SoundCloud at soundcloud.com/spell it out, hashtag NFZ, and the Apple Podcast app.
Now, let's kick it back over to Realistic Randy and the Mediocre at Best Sports Podcast.
So that's Matt and Jay of the No Fly Zone podcast. They do great stuff. You should go ahead and check them out. Jay in particular, he used to host his own show, the Jay Says Podcast show. And I was on his podcast once. We talked Vikings, we talked Cowboys, because he's a big-time Dallas Cowboys fan. I believe they're based out in Dallas, in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. But anyway, go ahead and check out this show. But moving on to the offensive side of the ball, I'm going to give them a B+. I'm going to give them a B+, starting with the offensive line. The offensive line has been outstanding. My whole gripe with this team last year, everybody knows it, was the offensive line. We couldn't get nothing going. We couldn't get protection. The fact that Sam Bradford made it all throughout last year was a miracle in itself. Couldn't get a push on the ball for the run game. Couldn't do a damn thing. That was the only weakness of this team. And now there's nothing to talk about with this offensive line. There's nothing to talk about whatsoever. Last year, the Vikings had the worst rushing attack at 3.2 yards per carry. This year, as of right now, they're at 4 yards a carry, and even 4 yards a carry. My whole thing is, as long as we have an average offensive line, I'm okay with that. So right now, they're pretty much average in the league right now, or pretty much midway through the league as far as yards per carry. And the whole thing that we were talking about last year was the push. Can this offensive line get the push that it needs to? When you're at the goal line, when you're talking about 3rd and 1 or 4th and inches, can you get that push so that the running back can get there? And they couldn't get it. They were soft as hell. The defensive line, the opposing defensive line just kept pushing them back. They couldn't do it whatsoever. But I tell you what, that's all changed now. This new zone blocking scheme they've got, courtesy of Pat Shermer, they're absolutely amazing. And Pat Elflein, for what it's worth, I said, hey, let's go and get, what's his name, Dan Feeney. I would have been better. I said, hey, I would have preferred him. I'm absolutely wrong about that. Pat Elflein, he's an absolute rhino out there. He's going down the field, making extra blocks, making dudes wreaking havoc on other dudes. He's absolutely amazing. Here's the other thing, too. The run game's been great. They've been getting that push that we've been looking for the last couple of years. But then when you talk about pass protection, according to Football Outsiders, so Football Outsiders, they do all these like formulas and everything, like adjusted sack rates and all this other stuff, not just looking at the sack number itself, but adjusted sack rates. I don't even know how they calculate that. According to Football Outsiders, the Vikings have the 4th best pass protecting offensive line. Who the hell saw that coming? Really? That is amazing. Riley Reef, he hasn't given up a sack. And when you think about this, the way that this offensive line is performed, especially compared to last year, suddenly these running backs, they're getting a lot of holes to run through that they didn't have last year. They're getting a lot of spacing to run through based off this zone blocking scheme they got. And when it comes to pass protection, these receivers' routes are developing, something that wasn't able to happen last year. The thing was last year, there was a lot of quick passing plays. Everything, dink and dunk, quick passes, because you couldn't let the receivers' routes develop because Sam Bradford didn't have enough time to throw the football. And now they're getting that, so they're doing absolutely amazing. And here's another thing, too. Last year, the Vikings gave up 38 sacks throughout all of 2016. As of right now, they're on pace for 20. They're on pace for 20 sacks right. They gave up 10 sacks right now, up to week 8. 10 sacks. They're on pace for damn near half of that of what they produced last year. Look, I've got nothing but great things to say about them. I am absolutely thrilled with what the offensive line has been doing. Then you move on to the running backs. I mean, what is there to say? No Dalvin Cook. He's out for the year. Hopefully he comes back. He was doing a great job in the time that he was there. But Jerick McKinnon and Latavius Murray has masked the absence of Dalvin Cook. They've been great. Jerick McKinnon, we had Jerick McKinnon last year. He couldn't do a damn thing with that offensive line, but the offensive line is helping them out. So I'm very happy for them. And then when you talk about the receivers, Diggs, look, he's been hampered with injuries, the groin injury. He came back last week against the Cleveland Browns. Didn't really do all that well, but I expect him to get better. Thielen is having a monster year. I'm very happy for him. I'm so glad that we have him. Kyle Rudolph, you know what? He's a great pass-catching tight end. Very reliable hands. But you know what? I wish he could break a couple of tackles once in a while. He doesn't really seem to be good at that. I know once he catches the ball, he's going down right on the spot. But Kyle Rudolph, at this point, he is who he is. So I'm okay with that for now. And then when you talk about Michael Floyd, he's been a complete non-factor. And then Laquan Treadwell. Look, my only gripe with this receiving core, I don't want to see Laquan Treadwell on the field anymore. He's been a bust, okay? There was a play in that Cleveland Browns game where he caught the ball, and I think it was right before halftime. They were trying to get up, move the ball up, and get a field goal. And they threw the ball up, and Laquan Treadwell, he made a catch for, I want to say it was about 21 yards, something like that. I don't have the numbers in front of me. It's about 20-something yards. And then he was trying to run up the field instead of going out of bounds because the clock was ticking. And then he almost fumbled the ball inbounds and turned the ball over. The dude, he can't get separation. He's pretty much a jump ball receiver only. And still, even then, he hasn't been getting those 50-50 balls that you expected him to get. So my thing is, play Jarius Wright. I want to see Jarius Wright over Laquan Treadwell in the depth chart. He's been much more reliable. He's been reliable for the last several years. He can get separation. He's been doing his job. I don't understand why he's been in the doghouse for the last couple of years. So anyway, that's all I've got to say about that as far as the receiving core. As far as quarterbacks is concerned, Case Keenum, this deserves an entire segment on its own. I'm going to talk about the play of Case Keenum, and as far as the rumblings right now, because now there's rumblings as far as within the fan base and some media outlets as far as should Case Keenum be the automatic starter for the rest of the year. Basically, to hell with Teddy Bridgewater. We're just going to forget it. I'm going to talk about that next in the next segment. But first, I'm going to introduce a new segment called Elsewhere in Sports. Elsewhere in Sports. So this is the segment. So, by the way, we're trying to restructure the show, make it a little bit more clean so you guys can enjoy it and whatnot. So, anyway, this is a segment where I talk about any random thing that happened outside the sports world that I'm not talking about in the current segment. I want to get to the Cleveland Browns real quick. And we all know that the Cleveland Browns are a dumpster fire of an organization. We know they are basically the JV squad of the entire National Football League. But the Cleveland Browns have found a way to basically look even worse. So I'm looking at this right now. According to ESPN's Adam Schefter, and I'm reading this from the Washington Post. According to ESPN's Adam Schefter, Cleveland and Cincinnati came to an agreement on dealing A.J. McCarron, quarterback A.J. McCarron from the Bengals to the Cleveland Browns at 3:55 p.m. But while the Bengals sent their approval of the trade to the NFL in time because the trade deadline was Tuesday. It was Tuesday at 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So they agreed to the trade at 3:55 between each other, 3:55 p.m. But while the Bengals sent their approval of the trade to the NFL in time, the Browns did not. And the reason reportedly why the Browns were not able to report the trade to the league office in time is because they were too busy celebrating the trade. Really? You were celebrating the trade before you made the call? That's really what happened? That's like, let's say you're a college student. You pull an all-nighter and you're working on your final paper. You finally get done. You have like 4 or 5 cups of coffee. You finally get done. You turn your computer off. You breathe a sigh of relief, and suddenly you realize you forgot to hit save. That's like going out on a date. That's like going out on a date. You finally get the girl of your dreams to go out with you. You're having a great time. Then the bill comes and all of a sudden you forgot that you left your wallet at home. You are an embarrassment to the entire NFL. I can't believe that the Cleveland Browns fans actually stick with your sorry asses. You know what? Here's the thing. And look, I'm looking at this right now. Apparently the Browns, they tried to call the league office after 4 p.m. and say, hey, you should approve of the trade. And the NFL said, to hell with y'all. Y'all should have called in time. Here's the thing. You guys called the league office late after the 4 p.m. deadline. Let's say, 4:03 p.m. By 4:04 p.m., the owner should have fired the entire front office. You should have all been fired. You are an absolute disgrace. I don't understand why the fans stick with you. You are an absolute dumpster fire of an organization. But you know what? It is the Cleveland Browns. And you can't be surprised. That could have been your quarterback of the future, but who knows? All you do is screw up quarterbacks anyway. So I'm sure A.J. McCarron is breathing a sigh of relief. So anyway, we're going to talk about the quarterback position for the Minnesota Vikings. First, we're going to break down Case Keenum's game. How has he been doing this year? And then the whole notion of should Case Keenum be the automatic starter for the rest of the year, regardless of Teddy Bridgewater's health status. We'll talk about that next. Mediocre at Best Podcast with Realistic Randy.
Not caring what the time is. When I'm in my town, I'm only chilling with the finest. I've been out here trying to kick it for a minute, but I'm on a